Okay, so yeah, I was talking about APM. So big IP APM is nothing but this is a VPN solution. Okay, we can say that this is SL VPN solution. So you know about the VPN. For example, if you just want to access your network um, from remote and securely, so you can use a VPN and you can access your private network. So APM is providing same functionality, but there are additional things that can be offered by the APM. So we will talk about that. Big IP APM. So here you can see that Big IP APM provides granular access control to the discrete application and network. It is also supporting two-factor authentication and federated identity management. So when I talk about federated identity management, so it is supporting SSO, right, single sign-on, and it is also supporting 2FA, two-factor authentication. It is providing different type of services using which you can protect your application or you can manage your application to publish for the VPN users. APM would be, you can deploy APM as a hardware. So you can purchase big IP hardware. There you can deploy APM module. You can deploy APM on cloud, or if you want to have the virtual machine, so on the virtual machine also you can enable APM. This is provided by the number one is identity federation and SSO. Using this, user can authenticate using SSO or federation services, and APM would be providing policy-based access for the resources. So when I say resources, it would be application or it would be network. It is also providing client and web-based SSL VPN access. So basically, you know that if you just want to, you should have some software using which you connect to the VPN. So using client-based VPN, yes, you can connect to the VPN services. And if you don't want to install the client software, you can use web-based VPN SSL services to connect to the to your network. It is also providing web portal access for the application. So maybe you have a remote user, and for users want to publish some application on the website itself on web portal. Yes, it is possible that APM can do that. And if you have any kind of desktop-based application, for example, VDI, etc. So for those VDI, you can access through APM with the controlled manner, which is providing policy-based access. Okay, and you can, the APM is also providing deployment. Okay, so here administrator can create different type of policy for different set of user to access network resources or the application which would be published through the APM. And also it is providing the secure web gateway proxy. So for example, if user is trying to access any website, so it can do the malware for the website as well. So these are the APM services. Moving to course content, what we are going to cover here. So in course, we are going to cover that how to set up the big IP system. That means how to set up your F5 device. Okay. Then we will talk about web application access. Then we will discuss about access policy. What is access? Then we will talk about how you can manage the APM. Okay. And we'll talk about authentication, that how user can be authenticated, whether this can use internal database, external database. And then we will talk about configuration of portal access. So we will configure portal. On that portal, we will publish some of the application. And we'll talk about network access. So here we will talk about how SSL VPN can be used to access internal network, okay, rather than accessing a single host or a single application. We will also talk about that what all the client side checks you can enable. For example, if client want to connect to client want to connect to your network that is hosted behind the data center. So first of all, it would be connecting to the APM, okay, using SSL mechanism. So while connecting to the APM, what all the things can we check on the client? So you might have seen that when you are connecting to the VPN, your firewall should be enabled, your antivirus should be updated, your operating system should be updated. So all those checks you can enable on this APM device as well. Okay, so here we will talk about that what all the client check we can enable, and we will also discuss about the authorization. So let's say what is the authorization. Let's say we have different group, one is sales, other is marketing. So we don't want to provide same access to both of the group. We just want to provide some additional access for the marketing. Okay, so on that case, we can define authorization policy for different groups. We will discuss about that. We will also talk about the access control lists, what all the access control list you can apply for the user access. And then we will talk about single sign-on, okay, that how APM can integrate with the SSO. And then we will talk about iRule. So iRule, as you know that iRule is a part of advanced scripting. So here we will talk about that how you can use iRule into the APM as well. And then we will talk about that how you can customize the APM device, including policy, authorization, single sign-on, everything. And then we'll talk about web top. Okay, so web top, nothing but this is providing the a kind of portal to the user where user would be seeing all the related application, and after clicking the application, it can access the particular functionality of the application. So we will talk about that, what is the web top. And also we will talk about big IP edge client. So if user want to connect through the VPN, it can use edge client. So how you can configure web big IP edge client, that we will talk about in the course content. Moving to further, this is F5 architecture basically. And you know that F5 can be deployed as a virtual edition. You can deploy as a hardware. So we have a different hardware of F5. We have a virtual edition that is a software or virtual machine, we can say. But we have a different types of hardware. So we have simple hardware and we have a Preon series hardware. These are the high scalable hardware. Okay, so F5 hardware you can purchase. On the top of hardware, their operating system would be installed. Okay, or on top of virtual machine, their operating system would be installed. And the operating system name is TMOS, Traffic Manager Operating System. This is a customized operating system of F5. And on the top of TMOS, a particular module can be enabled. So in F5 we have different type of module. Some module is providing availability, some module is providing acceleration, some module are providing security. So APM is a part of security module. Okay, here you can control application access and the VPN kind of things. Okay, so this is F5 architecture. And if I talk about the F5 device, it is working as a full proxy. When I say full proxy, whenever it's client trying to access any application that is hosted on F5, so client would be hitting to the application which is hosted on F5, and on the behalf of client, F5 is sending the request to the backend node. So for example, you can say that if we have a server over here, and let's say this server is providing web functionality. Okay, so and this server will be published through F5. So user would be sending request to the F5, and on the behalf of user, F5 is sending request to the server. So three-way handshake for this client would happen first with F5, and then F5 would be doing three-way handshake to the server. What is the benefit we are getting? We can modify the application data. Okay, so for example, if it is sending any request, and on that request, if you just want to add any header or any additional things, we can modify. Not only we can modify a request, we can modify the response as well. Okay, we can enable encryption. Okay, so let's say this server is working on port number 80, but what I required that user who is accessing from the public network, they should be accessing using 443. So yes, we can do that on F5 end. We can enable 443. Okay, so between user and F5 there would be encrypted data, and maybe between uh, F5 to the backend server, maybe that is unencrypted data. The reason is the server is running on port number 80. We can enable the compression as well. So for example, you know that when user is accessing using WAN link, so compression is really important. Why? Because WAN link is little slow than LAN link. So if we just want to compress the data, yes, that can be done. Between user and F5 compression we can enable, and between F5 and server, there is no compression enabled. Similarly, let's say if my server is running on old version of HTTP, but what we required to provide more security or more feature, we required HTTP version 2. So between F5 and client, we can enable HTTP version 2, and between F5 to the server, we can enable HTTP 1.1. So this is working as a full proxy architecture. Full proxy architecture means each request would be proxied through F5. Moving to next, F5 deployment. So F5 deployment, you know, we can do as a one-arm mode. So there would be single interface in one-arm mode. There would be single interface which would be carrying the request and response as well from the server and client. And we have the other type of deployment of F5, which is known as a two-arm mode, so or inline mode. So we can do this as well. So there would be two interface in this condition. One interface would be for external and other interface for the server side for the backend. So user would be sending the request to the front end, and F5 on the behalf of user sending the request to the backend. So this is deployment model. Now moving to next, this is a basic component. Okay, might you have seen. So this is hardware basically. On hardware we have management interface, we have USB interface, failure interface, Ethernet interface, and we have SFP for gigabit. Okay, and then this is LCD panel as status CD, and these are the navigation key using which we can configure F5 basic settings. So these are the interface, which is Ethernet interface, which is known as a TMM switch basically. So it is known as a TMM. This interface is going to participate on the load balancing, right? So that's why this is called TMM switch. Okay, moving to lab. Do we have any question?
Hi, sir.
Yeah. Hi.
So, once the theory is being completed, then how we gonna practice by ourselves? How we gonna practice? Do we have a? Are you going to give us a lab setup so that we can practice one by one?
That's correct. So I'm coming on that part. So basically, we provide lab. Okay. So just so this is the lab basically for APM. Here you can see lab how you can access. Basically, this lab you can access using lab.netminion.net. And to configure the lab, you are going to get workbook and you are going to get video support. So according to workbook, you can configure the lab. And this lab you can access from anywhere. It's and you can access 24/7. Okay.
We cannot see.
Here you are going.
Are you sharing something? We are not able to see. Now we can see.
Hold on, just give me a minute. No.
Now it's better.
Okay, great. So here you can see this is the lab. Okay. So lab you can access using labs.net. Just log out and try again. Okay, so when you type lab.netminion.net, you would be landing on this page. And if you have access, you can put your user ID and password, and then you can log in. So you can click on access your lab. Here lab.
I'm little bit afraid if I'm not getting that choppy internet while doing the practice, sir.
Okay. All right. So this is the lab basically. So I'm taking a simple scenario over here to tell you that what I mean. A simple overview of APM I'm going to take over here. So as you know that you are all aware about the F5 LTM. Let me just talk about that.
This must be EVNG professional, sir, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a similar kind of platform we are using. Okay, so let's take a scenario of APM. Okay, I would take a simple and probably try to replicate on this lab. So let's assume you have F5 device over here. This is F5 device. An F5 device has two interface, E1.1 and E1.2. So let's say user who are here trying to access the resources which is behind the F5, the servers, and these servers are running what? These servers are running website, web application. So simply what user would do, let's say on this web application, there is no authentication is configured. So what user is trying to do, user would try to hit the F5 virtual server, which is over here. And as soon as it would hit the virtual server, the F5 is sending that request to the backend pool. And user would be able to access without any issue. What additional things we want that whenever user is accessing these application, first of all, user has to authenticate. We just want to make sure that user has to authenticate. If user is not authenticated, it can't access this web application. Okay. So for that, what we can do, let's say on the web application level, as I told you, you can provide the authentication on the web application level. On the web application, you can put the authentication page or login page. But let's say on the web application, we don't have a login page. We don't have any authentication mechanism. So where we can enable authentication, we can enable that authentication on F5 with the help of APM. Using access policy manager, we can enable the authentication. Once user would be hitting this F5 virtual server, it can access. So in our case, I have configured F5 virtual server on 100.0.0.50. I would show you in the lab as well. User would be hitting this 100.0.0.50. It would be able to access the pool. This is web server pool. And web server pool is running on these IP 192.168.2.3. It is running on 2.6 up to 6. So I can show you. This is a client. This is external client. Okay, let me just. This is the external client. It is having IP 100.0.0.50. Sorry, 10. Hitting the virtual server that is activated on F5 is this device. So it is hitting the virtual server on this interface gig 0/2. We have a virtual server. The virtual server is 100.0.0.50. And then F5 is sending that request back to these pool. These are the pool. sending that request to the pool. Okay, so it is sending the request to the pool via this way using gig 1/1. 1/1 is an internal, so it is sending the request back to this pool. So as of now, this Windows user is able to access this backend server without any authentication. Let me show you the entire configuration we have on F5 right now. And later what I would do, I would enable APM over here. I would configure APM policy and then try to send the request to this backend node.
Sorry to interrupt, Amar, but do we have access to this lab?
Right now you don't have.
The joiners who have just joined right now on a quick
Right,
message.
right now you don't have, but once you pursue to the real course, so you would get the access to this lab. In demo, we
Okay.
don't provide the access, but later we will provide the access once you.
Okay.
So let me just log in here. Username is admin, password is NetMinion @123. So I have access this F5 device using management IP. This is management IP. And we have something on front end and we have back end. So I would show you. So here you can see I have a virtual server having IP 100.0.0.50. That's a front end. And on the back end, we have pool. The pool, we have 4 server, and those 4 server IP I would showing over here. Let's go to member. And let me show you all those backend server IP. So it's a we have 192.168.2.3, 4, 5, 6. So you can see over here, user would be hitting to the front end to the virtual server, and then it would be redirecting to the backend, and user would be able to access website. So if I check over here, so if I hit my virtual server, and sorry, just give me a minute. It's disconnecting. Yes, so you can see I have a virtual server over here. This is a virtual server which is running on 100.0.0.50. If I hit my virtual server from here, HTTPS 100.0.0.50, I can access the backend server. We have 4 server overall. You can see I can access server without any issue. The F5, I mean, currently there is no authentication. User can access website directly. Okay, so with the F5, what we will do, we will push the authentication. And for that, we will use F5 APM module. So I have already enabled APM module. I can show you. Uh, let's go over here. An APM module I have already enabled. So during the provision, we have already enabled this APM module. You can see access policy module is already enabled. And that's why we are getting this option. Which, which option? Let me show you. That's why we are getting this access option. So if you are getting this access option, that means APM is already enabled. All the APM configuration we will do this using this access option. Like LTM configuration we do using local traffic, DNS configuration we do using DNS option. Similarly, all the APM related configuration we will do on access one. So what is our goal right now? Our goal is to push the authentication. So on F5, using the APM module, push the authentication that whenever user would try to access this web application, which is hosted on the backend, before accessing that, they should authenticate. So for that, we can use APM policies. So I would enable APM policies, and that policy I would push to the virtual server. So what is the way? Let me show you. First, we need to create APM policy. To create the APM policies, we need to go profiles, and here we can create an access profile first. And we can give any name to the access profile. We can click on create and give any name to this access profile. So for example, I would say, listen, my profile name, I'm putting like web access. Application, I'm putting NetMinion. Profile type, this profile would be supporting everything. And over here, the profile language would be in English. Let's finish this. So we have created profile. And after that, what we can do, this is my profile. And for this profile, we can configure access policies. So by clicking on this edit option, we can configure access policy. So this is going to give us a visual way how we can configure this access policy. So we have access policy, and we can say that when user want to access the application, first accessing the application, it should get login page. So I would click on this plus icon, and I would say that by accessing the application, it should get login page. And then I would click on add item. Just a moment. Yeah. So user is going to get login page. On login page, it is going to get username and password. Nothing. Password would be in encrypted, and username would be on text format. I can click on save. So this is going to give user a login page. Once user would be able to get the login page, what would happen? So after getting a login page, user should be authenticated. So I would say authentication, and authentication, how I would do, I don't have Active Directory, otherwise I would have taken Active Directory. So I would use local database over here. Our user is going to be authenticate using local database. I would click on this. As soon as I would click on this, it would ask that on local database, what all the instance being called. So I need to create a local database instance later. So it is asking local database, and it is asking local database instance. I don't have right now, but I would create later. Then I would click on save. After that, when user is successfully logged on, what would happen? It should be allowed. So instead of saying deny, I would say it should be allowed. Click on save. Okay, so once it is allowed, then what we can do, we can further go and apply this access policy. So we can go here and apply the access policy. So this is applied. Now we can close. Now you can see the user journey. When user is getting started, it is going to get login page. After getting login page, user need to provide username and password. Then it is going to be authentication. That username password should be matched with the local database. If it is matched, then it is allowed. If it is logged, user is logged, or it's not matched, then user would be denied. Let me just close this. After applying, I need to create a database. So for database, I need to go to authentication, local user database, and user I need to create. So I need to go to authentication. Sorry, authentication. And in the authentication, you can see we have local DB. First, we need to create instance, and then we need to create a user. So click on create new instance, give it any name of instance. You can see what is the logout interval, lockout threshold, everything you can see over here. Instance name I'm putting local DB. And now I would create a user. I have option to create new user. Sorry, it's a little slow. Okay, but I can put the username over here. So I'm putting test user as a username. And password I'm putting test@123. And this local would be created into local DB instance. Let's click on OK. And then we need to go under profile, and I need to edit this profile. And in local DB auth, we just need to select the instance. Click on save. And then apply access policy. Okay, so again, I'm telling you what would be overall journey. As soon as user would try to access virtual server, it would be getting the login phase. On login phase, user need to provide username and password. That username and password is going to match with local database. And if it is successful, then user would be allowed to access. If not successful, user would be denied. Okay, so this policy, web access NetMinion, this need to be bind up uh, with the virtual server. In F5 APM, if you just want to bind up your access policy to the virtual server, then there is some condition. What all the condition we have? The server should be running on port number 443. That is one condition. The other condition is on server, TCP profile should be associated. On server, HTTP profile should be associated. And on server, client SSL should be associated. So let's check whether all these things are there in the virtual server or not. So I would go to local traffic and then virtual server. I would check all those things. Whether the server is running on port number 443, that we need to check. The virtual server should be configured on port number 443 on SSL basically. So you can see the virtual server is running on port number 443. The other thing on server, TCP profile should be enabled. So client profile, if you see, TCP profile is enabled. On virtual server, HTTP profile should be associated. It's associated. What else? Your client SSL should be enabled. So client SSL is already associated with this. If all these things are okay, then we can associate our access policy. So to associate access policy, you can see over here, we have an access policy section. Where it is over here. This access policy section you would only get if you have APM module is enabled. So we have APM module is enabled. Here we can associate the created access profile. We can just go over here and we can call that profile. And then we can update the virtual server. That's it. Now, if user is trying to access the virtual server, let me just open incognito mode. User will be getting login page, and then user need to provide right username and password. So let me just try to access virtual server HTTPS and then virtual server IP. Now we have done all the scenario. User should get login page. User is getting login page. Who is sending this login page? F5. User need to put right username password. So let me see if I'm putting wrong username and password. Test @123. I would not be able to log in if I'm putting wrong username password. I won't be able to do that. Okay, it's showing username and password is incorrect. So I can't access resources. If I just want to access the resources, I have to put right username and password. So let me just put right username and password. Test user and test@123 is the password. As soon as I would put this, I would be able to access application. Test user name. Let me change password first. test @123 test @123. Okay, now let me just try. Test user test @123. Log on. You can see I can access the server. Okay, so this one of the use cases we have seen. Similarly, we have multiple use cases. Okay. Any questions so far? Or any question in terms of understanding this? So let me just repeat what I did. Basically, earlier I haven't any APM policy. So user was able to access the virtual server directly. But as soon as I put the APM, user without authentication, user can't access my virtual server. That's what we did. All right, guys. So this is all on the demo. If you have any question in terms of course or in terms of understanding, yeah, please let me know.
Sir, how long, this is Gaurav, how long the course duration?
So it's I think if we go to our classes, so definitely we will able to cover in one month.
Is it 2 hours every day?
2 hours on weekend.
Hmm. 4. And
So
sir,
usually it's take 4 to 6 weekend.
4 to 6
That's
weekends.
the yes, right.
And how long we have a lab access for, sir?
So I think post completion of your course, you would get lab access for 1 month. One more.
There is question. This is Saleh. Can we apply this APM for the Outlook or only for OWA in the lab scenario?
Yes, you can apply for. I mean, there could be different thing. I mean, one of the use cases you have seen that we protected web application, but you can protect your client application. Client application means, let's say Outlook hosted on the VDI, okay, and users want to provide only Outlook access to the user. So definitely on from VDI, specific VDI, you can just expose Outlook application only. User would be clicking on the Outlook web application, Outlook application using WebTop, and there you can push the policy. So
This is same way that
yeah.
This is using the active sync or another one?
This is using active sync.
Okay.
There, or you can use app tunnel as well for this.
It is using any template or this is the manual policy to create, or it should be used the template in IApp.
No, this is using different thing. You need to use a wizard. Using wizard, you can publish.
Yes,
It's not using IApp.
yes, as above, it's for username and password.